Hello and welcome to Fire Headlines, where we cover the hottest topics in fire service news. I'm your host, Samantha Didion. This is part 2 of the after-action report of the Maui Wildfires that occurred in August of 2023. If you haven't already, please listen to part 1. Chief Roper, as far as the AAR goes, what were some of the main findings or main takeaways?
As part of our process, we looked at a lot of documents. And one of the amazing things is that the county of Maui has had quite a few reports being done and studies on their wildfire problem. But like a lot of jurisdictions, until they have a major incident, it's something in the future that might happen. Okay. So they now have the after-action review. They've had the incident. They now can see that they have some choices in front of them. What actions do we take? What building codes will they do? And so forth. And then how will they fund those type of things? We broke the after-action review up into really the 4 areas of preparation, mitigation, response, and recovery. And within each of those, then we have subsets that we took and we listed what were the challenges, the observations, and then the recommendations. So we have 111 recommendations within this report. And so when you ask, what were, some of the major takeaways from it, some of the things is that they have reserve apparatus, but they're not always equipped with equipment. So when this fire happened, people had to respond into their headquarters office. Then they had to spend time, depending on how many people were there, to actually put hose, nozzles, equipment, and so forth on. But in Maui, what we found out is they only have X number of radios for assigned positions on their first run equipment. They don't have personal issued radios. They don't have personal issued fire tents. Where are the fire tents kept on the equipment so it can be used? I think the essence of the after action is the evolution between what all of us are guilty of predicting what could happen in the future and then actually taking the actions before the emergency incident happens. That is probably the major takeaway for me, is that the county of Maui and the officials, policymakers, and I hope the public now have seen that terrible things can happen in relationship to wildfires, and now it's time to do something with it. We have spent time with the Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization, who takes a lead role in educating on what the wildfire problem is for all the islands. And with climate change issues and so forth, there was a recent article just a couple of weeks ago about how the wildfire problem in all of the islands is predicted to escalate over time and not go away. So in our report, we talk about the historical issues of the land conversions to where it is today. And we have a list of recommendations on what to do with the vegetation management as well as the built environment.
Yeah, I think, one of the more interesting things is really, as you peel back, part of the information we learned was just a land conversion from agriculture, pineapples and sugarcane, to, now, not profitable to continue to do that, and how, nobody's maintaining that land. And they're like anywhere else, they've got growth going on in the upcountry, where, clearance and how they, what they do about, future building. Those are, I think, some real eye openers in at least one side of it. And, like I said, it's been interesting watching, some people as they blog this report. And I mean it from a standpoint is that, some people look at it as well. they need more suppression, and that's not all it says. There's certain areas they need, and if people who see this broadcast haven't seen the media release that Maui Fire Department did between Chief Ventura and Chief Giese, I would tell you to look at that 30-minute media event that they did. I thought they did an excellent job, but suppression's one side of it. Maui hasn't been able to keep up, like a lot of places in the country, with meeting demand for the growth that's going on in Maui County. And not just for the growth there, but just think about all the population that continues to come in. So they're willfully, behind in doing some of that. But on the same end, take time to review this and look at, some of the things that need to be done as far as preparation, mitigation, what's going to need to go on recovery. Some of the interactive relationships that, and like anywhere, you go through good times when there's some really good relationships, and then things kind of fall off. And, hopefully one of the things they do is that they reignite, because we could tell they've had some really good interagency cooperation between law, fire, EMS, public works, emergency management. Those are the things that I think if we stress anywhere is cooperation. And, it's kind of funny is that, and Chief Roper will appreciate this. We come from a state where fire scope grew, evolved from, but in our field operations guide, nowhere in there do we talk about the leadership that's needed each and every day, to run an incident, or the interagency cooperation that needs to take place. And I think, Chief Roper and I have we kind of laugh some days because we grew up in that era and believe it very strongly. It comes and goes and, through an organization, and some deal with it much better than others do. And I tell you this, my heart goes out to the citizens in the county of Maui, and they know they could do a better job in the future. I think they're going to strive to get to that point. Like any of us, the lessons learned that we're providing in this report will be, a good opportunity to move forward. And hopefully, this will provide some budget opportunity, some guidance, some direction for, again, not only the public safety side, but for government and the citizens as a whole. Because at the end of the day, I don't care how good your fire department is or your public safety folks are, without the support of the citizens each and every day, you're not going to get very far.
Right. I want to circle around to something Chief Roper started to touch on. These wildfires, or this wildfire complex, it made history, and there's a lot we can learn from it. What is some advice fire service leaders in the mainland can take away from this?
Everybody needs to expect the unexpected, okay? And it's only by going through that type of preparation can you best prepare yourself for a situation like this, when you've had the good training, you have good equipment, but Mother Nature is stronger than you are. Like I said, the number one takeaway that I think most of us, we don't understand until our backs are against the wall, is how to make that difficult decision that we're no longer going to try to put out the fire, that this is only life safety at all costs now. That kind of goes against our grain, okay, on how we've dealt with things in the past. And it's a very difficult lesson. But the other part is just understanding that Murphy's Law, what can go wrong will go wrong. And again, having those contingency plans, from your communications to loss of a line of duty death to, issues that, like, a lot of people don't realize that in Lahaina, they have a community center there, which has a large police office there, as well as the fire station. And during the middle of this, they were evacuating people from Lahaina into the community center. Well, the fire began to encircle the community center. They had to evacuate their evacuation shelter and relocate it several miles away. Those are the things that we don't usually think about, but they happen. And so this is an opportunity that people in the continental U.S. on the mainland should look at what are the recommendations and how do they apply to them? Because other than 3 or 4 of them are only germane to the island because of their history, but everything else can apply to anywhere else that a wildfire can happen.
Do either of you have any insights on how the Maui Fire Department is doing now with the fire season looming? Like, are they prepared for the 2024 season, or are they still waiting on shipments of new material that they might have lost in the fires?
Well, I think, they lost one fire engine, and the fire department in Menlo Park, California, gave them a fire engine to help them out. They have been buying equipment and so forth to get back up to where they were before. So I think they will be as equipped as they were going into this year's fire season. They're already talking about the prediction of their drought situation over in Hawaii. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand, because all we see is Hawaii as a vacation spot with water, beaches, that type of thing. But Hawaii, in the report, we talk more about it, and there's links about every island has a dry side and a wet side, and it depends on the elevation on the island too, and whether they have a volcano, active volcano. To answer your question is, I think Maui Fire is as prepared, and I would say actually better, because of the life lessons that they've had from last year's fire. Personnel there learn from it. They're improvising. They'll overcome the obstacles they'll be faced with. And I just want people to also understand that as stressed as their fire organization was in Maui, their system never broke. Okay. It did what a lot of us did. It was maxed out, but it didn't break. The people improvised, they overcame. They went around the situation, and they were able to affect numerous, we're talking in the hundreds of life rescues. And those are the hard things to quantify. And it's the untold story about actually how many people were saved from the community of Lahaina. There was a lot of devastation, but going into this year, I think Maui is as prepared, or I would say they're better prepared than they were last year.
They were already making adjustments before our report came out in some areas. So I really think that they're in a good place. I've got to imagine that the additional equipment they needed to put on their reserve apparatus is probably an easy one to complete that assignment versus getting new apparatus and some other stuff that are in there. But I found them to be a good group of folks, the men and women of the Maui Fire Department. Their 911 center, there's stories that some previous dispatchers, who were no longer working there at 911, actually came in and volunteered to help out, as an example. Those are the things that, doesn't happen everywhere, but tight-knit communities and group of people always, surface and make some necessary adjustments. And hopefully for them, this will be the first and only major catastrophic wildland conflagration fire they have.
Absolutely. Is there anything else either of you would like to add before we wrap up today's episode?
I would strongly encourage people to get a copy of the report and go through it, because I think a lot of people are under the assumption that Maui Fire they didn't have a lot of resources, they're on an island, and so forth. And when you read the report, some of those things are true, but when you read the report and understand how good the Maui Fire Department is and how progressive they are, and that this is really a story that Mother Nature was stronger than what the resources were there at that time, at the peak time that the wind was going. The other thing that we talked to people during the interviews is we asked them the question, what do you think would have happened if the Lahaina fire happened first and then the other fires happen afterwards. Because what people don't understand is the Olinda Kula fire, they happened right after midnight on the 8th. As they happened is Lahaina had the first fire, they squashed it and so forth. But there was the other fire in Pelehu that was burning toward Kihei. And if it only had basically 2 resources assigned to it. And if the Lahaina was the first fire, we may have had the same type of situation in Lahaina happen over in Kihei. So it's all about a matter of perspective and timing. And people need to understand the full scope of what Maui Fire was faced with and how they handled it.
I would tell you that I feel very honored to work with Chief Roper on this after action for the Maui Fire Department and working with Chief Ventura and his staff. I've been involved in a lot of after actions in my 45 years, but this will be a memorable one for the work we put into doing what we did. And just very grateful to have had the opportunity to get to work on this project for them.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Chiefs, for joining me today. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. A link to the After Action report can be found in the show notes of this episode. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and follow us on social media. If you have a question for the panel, please reach out to us at fireheadlines@wfca.com and let us know what's on your mind. We'll see you back here next week for more Fire Headlines.